Alexa, turn on studio. Welcome into the Hoopsville Studios once again on this fine Monday. How are you, everybody? I'm Dave McHugh, your host. Appreciate you taking the time to join us on a Monday. It is now time for the Top 25 Double Take. The new Top 25s are out. If you're watching this show, this means you are a supporter of the program. If you're watching it live or archive initially, eventually the general public gets to see the entire show or listen to it. But if you are watching us live or you're listening live or something like that, you know what I'm trying to say. Thank you for your support. If you're not, buymeacoffee.com/hoopsville. It's at the top of the screen, including a QR code. We appreciate your support. On the women's side, which we will be talking to Scott Peterson, nobody dropped out of the top 25 poll this week, which meant nobody entered either. A little bit of shuffling of the decks a little bit. Some teams fell, some teams rose. On the men's side, 3 new teams into the top 25. Carthage, Whitworth, and Oshkosh left into the poll. Whitewater, WashU, Roanoke. We'll talk a little bit about those. And we have a new number 1. Not on the women's side. NYU continues to win. But on the men's side, it's now Randolph-Macon with 12 first-place votes. Trinity, Connecticut with 4 is in second. Emory with 2 votes is in third. Chicago's in fourth. Nary a first-place vote. St. Thomas, Texas, this is interesting. They have 6 first-place votes, but they're in fifth. So it's either you're voting for them first or you're got them low, which is weird because I'm neither. And then Montclair State has 1 first-place vote, and they're 6th. We'll talk about that with our panel, which might be the last time we do this of the season, just because we are not sure what we're doing next week. But joining us is Bob Quillman from sunny and maybe warm Dallas, Texas, and Ryan Scott from, it was a blizzard, but it wasn't a blizzard. We luckily missed what's going on in New England. Ryan Scott from Delaware. How you guys doing?
Doing good, Dave.
Well, Dave.
Thanks for having us.
Appreciate you guys joining me. Hey, let's get it out of the way. Who'd you vote for number 1, Ryan?
I've been voting for Randolph-Macon the last few weeks, and I stuck with them. When there's a lot of upheaval, you want to stick with the team. You can be pretty confident it's going to show up every single night the same way. I do still have some questions about their size against some of these teams, but they keep winning, and you don't see a lot of bad games out of them. So I'm sticking there for now.
Fair point. Bob, yours?
Same here. I've been Randolph-Macon for, I think, 3 weeks in a row for similar reasons. It's just, they're so consistent. It's for me, at this point of the year, I'm looking for like who shows up every night, and they certainly do. I also have questions about their size. I keep thinking that in the tournament they're going to run into some team that's too big for them, but they've played a lot of big teams in the ODAC, and they've done just fine. And so I've been on the Randolph-Macon number 1 train for a few weeks now.
Awesome. Well, that's good. I've been voting for Randolph-Macon much of the season, but you're wondering who that first place vote is for Montclair? It's this guy.
Okay.
So it came down to me on this. I had Randolph-Macon number 1, Montclair number 2 a handful of weeks ago. Montclair got that a big win. I'm now forgetting who they played. Apologies. They got a solid win in conference and went, okay, at this point, they're taking all comers. They haven't lost. Do I feel more confident about Randolph-Macon against the Montclair schedule? Yeah, but they've also lost twice, including Averett. I'm gonna make the switch. So I switched to Montclair. They lost, and I went and took the adage of how have I handled this with every other team who's lost, especially in conference when I expect them not to go undefeated. I haven't moved them. It's not like they lost to the bottom team in the conference. They didn't even lose to the middle team in the conference. They lost to the top team in the conference beside themselves on the road for senior day. So I went, you know what? I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's see how the week goes. I kept it Montclair. But it seems like everybody else pulled the parachute, because if I'm voting them number 1 and they're 6th, it means everyone else went, oh, forget it. I'm dropping them.
Well, I like that you stayed with them, because I do think that people sometimes overreact to just like a loss in general. And in any conference, I would think the number 1 team going on the road to the number 2, which that's not like an upset. We expect that road team, or that home team, in this case TCNJ, to win the game. And so yeah, I was in the same boat in that I didn't drop them a bunch, But kudos to you for staying with it, Dave. I like people not overreacting to what is like a good loss.
I appreciate that. You pointed it out. Somebody said stunning loss, right? With TCNJ winning, and you're kind of like, this isn't
It's
stunning.
not stunning. It'd be
No.
like, yeah, like if Platteville loses at Stevens Point, you're like, well, of course they did. It's just how it works. It's how it works.
Exactly. I mean, if the bottom of the conference team had beaten them, I've been like, oh, hold on. Like, that is a stunner. So thank you. Appreciate that. Your check's in the mail. Hey, question though. St. Thomas is an interesting one. I want to throw this guy at you guys just because it kind of hits me interesting. They're getting 6 first place votes, but they're 5th. This also feels like either you're buying in or you're not. I've got them 3rd.
I have them 14th right now.
Oh,
wow. Okay.
Okay.
We're
having a great show already.
Well, so I've been kind of slowly dropping them down the last few weeks because I end up doing a lot of the scoreboard, right? And they're in the central time zone. Their games are later. And so I have been able to watch the second half of a lot of their games. And they've played, 5 out of the last 6 conference games really close and really sloppy. Like the teams in their conference are not at a top 10 level, and they're playing down to the competition, and they don't look like they did at the beginning of the year when they were having all those great results. And so like they're perfectly capable of coming back, but I don't have a lot of confidence right now when they haven't played a good team or well in quite a while. I think they've had one really big blowout, but like a lot of the games have not been good. They're undersized to begin with. They haven't had tough competition in a while. I'm just, I gotta see it, and they're not showing it.
Yeah,
Fair.
I'm up in the top 5 with them, I believe. I do struggle with them just a little bit because I struggle with all the teams that get into this funk of like the weak conference schedule, like Maryville of Tennessee. It's just so hard to gauge them once they get into their league. And with St. Thomas, I like that performance at WashU where they only lost by 1, had a really great chance to win that game. So I like that, but it's not like I have WashU in the top 10 either at this point. So I've just kind of rolled with St. Thomas, and they look pretty good to me. But they're in that group for me that's even with, there's like 15 teams, pick them out of a hat for me.
So true. So darn true. Took me forever today. I actually, one of the rare times I left the top of my poll to be decided later and left the bottom of my poll to be decided later. And I filled in the rest and I walked away for a bit to think about it because those 2 sections were where I was having the most problems. Almost everybody else was a carbon copy over, maybe a couple of shuffles. We're not doing deep dive, debatable, and dubious tonight because, well, we're running out of teams. We have talked about so many kind of on repeat, but we're also into the final week of the regular season. We're eyeing March at this point. This top 25, most years we get them all in, but not always. And so there's some teams we haven't talked about. So let's talk about a couple of teams that are really bubble-ish. Maybe bubble out, bubble in, depending on the day and how they're playing. Roanoke re-entered the top 25, guys, but they're in this situation. We talked about it on Thursday with Matt on the Top 16 show, where the ODAC could incredibly end up with just 1 pick. Ryan, this is your thoughts on Roanoke. And I'll admit, my buddy Clay's the coach, so this feels weird for me, but go ahead.
Well, so I will point back to the preseason D3 DataCast show where you had to come up with your crazy predictions. And I said, there's a good chance the ODAC would be a 1-bid league this year. So I'd just like to point that out.
Yeah, I'm going to have to go get that audio bite.
There. I also said the WIAC might be, so that was completely wrong, but I did get the one right. Roanoke, I think, is a really solid team, but it's one of these teams that struggles to score sometimes. And when you're relying on your defense like they do, if you've got a night where you're only at 85% and you can't score the basketball, it's going to be hard to win. They're down kind of right at the end of the at-large selections, and they've really, really run into some terrible luck, right? Because they're up against Washington and Lee in the first round of the ODAC tournament, and this is the only team that beat them twice this year. Right. They lost twice to Washington. It's just a bad matchup for them, and they have to play them again here in the tournament, and they really need to win that game. They probably have to win 2, I think, to get a real good shot to get in. It's a team I think everybody likes and no one would want to play, but they just haven't won enough games.
I'm torn. WNL's coached by a man named Chris McHugh. And Clay Nunley and I were classmates. I hate this matchup personally. No, you're right. But what is the old adage? It's tough to beat a good team 3 times. But that said, WNL certainly seems to have Roanoke's number. Bob, your thoughts on the Maroons?
Very good team. They do have some games where they struggle to score it, like Ryan said. I think it's fascinating looking at the NPI. You know, they're sitting there at 22. And the whole NPI coming down to these decimals is really cool because Elmhurst is the team that's one above them at 21. 60.869 for Elmhurst, and Roanoke is 60.864. And so, you know, you just look at that one in particular, sitting there. That's the actual cut line right now, 21 versus 22. Roanoke certainly has to win a couple games here, it seems to me. And yeah, they're one of 2 teams in the top 25. We'll get to the other one in a second. That is not a lock. I think the other 23 teams in the top 25 are in, but Roanoke and the one we'll get to in a second, they're not a lock.
Yeah, it's kind of weird. Listen, Clay's team's really good defense, right? But they just have a couple untimely losses that are kind of messing them up. And what Matt said, the ODAC's just kind of in a funky year. Really good teams, but just the schedule hasn't really panned out. The other team you alluded to is Maryville. You know, this is a pretty good team. I'm now voting for them once again in the top 25 for a couple of weeks now. We always know that they're going to be ready for anybody, but they got to win it out, Bob.
They do. They don't have a path to an at-large. Maryville is kind of in like the 33 at-large line at this point. There's no path. And so the Scots have to win their automatic qualifier to get in. They're a good team. I saw them in person the first weekend or at the Sigma tournament at IW. They're a good team. They lost to Oshkosh in that game I saw. Quite frankly, should have beaten them. They had an untimely technical foul that killed them. They beat Carthage, which was a good win. They played pretty well at the GLI. It's just the problem with Maryville is they get in that conference and then it's hard to assess how good they are because the competition in that league this year is just not great. But they have to win the automatic qualifier to play in March here.
Ryan, your thoughts on them?
Yeah, I mean, and this is where it kind of kills you, right? Because all those decimals are so close together. They have the 3-point loss that you mentioned against Oshkosh up at IWU. They've got a 4-point loss at Wash and Jeff at the GLI, and then a 3-point loss at Emory against Bates. And any of single one of those goes the other way, and they're right in the conversation for an at-large bid. Like that's the difference. And they might even be safe because those are all good teams. So you're going to get a lot of points out of those wins, you know, that are now losses. So they played the right schedule. They played the teams well. I mean, the Wash and Jeff one, I'm sure, is the one they want back. And that's my big thing with Maryville is when they are on, they are, you know, probably a top 15 level program.
Agreed.
But we saw that they played Carthage and this blew the doors off them. And then the next day, I mean, the Wash and Jeff was good and they played really well, but it was not the same team the next day. They didn't come out with the same consistency. They didn't come out with the same, you know, drive to win. And you're seeing that when you look through their conference games as well. Some of them are big blowouts. Some of them are way too close for the opponent they've got. And that really is the difference when it comes to this level, right? The teams that are at the top are the ones that are going to give you the same performance night in and night out, and you can count on. And Maryville has just not shown that yet. Obviously, they've got a conference tournament they have to get through, and then, you know, moving on from there, they're almost. It's the weird part is we're talking about this, but if it pans out correctly for everybody, they're almost certainly going to play Roanoke at Emory. That's just how the geography works out. There's not really any other option. And so, you know, we're hoping these 2 teams get in, but they may not. And then who knows who's going to be in Atlanta? I don't know how they'll work that out.
By the way, Bob, what is it with you going to games with untimely technicals?
That's true. That is true.
What is going on?
I've been at a couple of those this year. One I was thrilled about, actually thrilled about. The one involving Coach Placeres. I was kind of neutral on that one in the moment. The one in Washington Heights, I was all about. So yeah, I've got a track record.
Yeah, just found that in when you mentioned that. I went, wait, hold on. This is becoming a little bit of a pattern.
Yeah.
Watch out, Fort Wayne. I'm just warning everybody now. All right. By the way, Bob, you gonna let's ask real quick while we have them. Anybody going to Fort Wayne, and who's going to Indy?
I am at this point, I'm committed to both. I got the hotel booked for Fort Wayne, and I'm planning to go to Indy as well. So count me in.
Awesome, Ryan. I don't know what your plans are.
I will be at Fort Wayne. I've got that all booked and ready to go. I don't know if anyone knows my day job. I am a minister. I'm a pastor of a church, and Championship Sunday is Easter. So I've got some prior commitments.
Ryan,
that day.
push Easter off, man. Push it off. You don't have to be there. I will be at both.
They just use the Eastern Orthodox Easter, and then we'd be all set. But we don't do that.
Perfect. That's what after Masters too, right? So it works out well for everybody. I'll be at both as well. Circling back on Roanoke, according to Matt and Zach's numbers, 8.7% chance at an AQ. Okay, let's just be realistic. There's a chance.
Yeah.
If they make the quarterfinals, there's only a 1.6% chance that they make an at-large, 18% chance if they make the semis, and it jumps to a 95.5% chance if they make the finals.
That feels right to me. Looking at
it does.
It feels right to me. They've got to probably play in the title game to have that really good chance. It is so jumbled up. It's fascinating just looking at all the teams, sitting there from 17 to 30 or whatever. So yeah, that sounds right.
As tough as it is, I think on Selection Sunday, we could maybe pick them all. I think we can get them all right this year. Hey, looking at just some other teams in the top 25 in general, I just want to fire them out at you guys, get your opinions. We'll go bottom up. I'm kind of curious your take on Whitewater. They're in the top 25. I'm not voting for a WIAC team right now because I don't think anyone has stood out. And it's no knock. I think they got some tremendously good teams, and they've got a great conference. But no one has stood out from the conference. Bob, your thoughts on Whitewater, who entered the poll this week?
Hey, you know what? I spent so much of the year trying to figure out who the best WIAC team was, going back and forth between La Crosse and Platteville and Oshkosh and Stevens Point. And lo and behold, it's a team I never even considered until about the final 2 weeks. That's Whitewater that wins the regular season. Very good team. If you really go watch them play, they're just very sound on both ends of the floor. I'm voting for 3 WIAC teams. Someone was giving me grief for not having Stevens Point in. I have Whitewater, Platteville, La Crosse in. I think the WIAC teams are very good. Like I saw Oshkosh in person, and they're a very good team. They've lost some games though. So I'm impressed with Whitewater, but certainly not. When you think of the WIAC champion, to me, stuck in my head is like Stevens Point with that Jason Kelso dude from back in the day. Like there is no WIAC team that looks like that. These are good WIAC teams. They're all about even, and any of them can either go win the national championship or lose in the first round. They're kind of in that situation like everyone else is.
Yeah, I think if they're all equal, that's where I'm also struggling. Like if I got to pick one, how do I pick one? Ryan,
it is tough.
Yeah, your thoughts on the Warhawks?
I thought it was funny that I'm also voting for 3, and 2 of the ones Bob is voting for, I'm not. So between us, we have 5 of the WIAC teams in our poll. Yeah, it's Whitewater has just not been super impressive to me this year when I've watched them. They haven't really stood out, but at the same time, right, they're winning the game. They won the league, obviously. But I was more thinking, Bob, like that, I forget which year it was, like the 2015 Stevens Point team that won.
Yeah.
That was just very consistent, right? They no stars on that team whatsoever. They weren't flashy in any kind of way. They just showed up and won these games. And I don't know that Whitewater is at that level, obviously. But that's more what it reminds me of, is nobody really stands out. That doesn't do anything that you just immediately go, oh, that's a championship kind of team there. But obviously a ton of great players, good coaching. They've got plenty of experience coming out of here. I'm still not quite a believer, but we got a WIAC tournament here, and we'll see what happens this week.
That's right.
Very good point. All right. Moving up the chain a little bit. What are your thoughts on Wesleyan, the regular, the normal, the first Wesleyan, Ryan?
I feel like this is the opposite of what we just talked about with Whitewater. It's that Wesleyan team can look like the absolute best team in the country some nights, and some nights they look very average. Um, they've shown up for some of the big games, obviously, which is why they are where they are. Since what is that? The loss at Amherst in January, they've only lost one game by 1 point at Connecticut College. Right after the big win at Tufts, which is kind of an understandable thing. And so they are young, right? And they're having to replace the two All-American guys from last year. So maybe some growing pains that they're trying to finally figure out. This is a good team. And again, it's another one. We'll see what happens in this, the last couple of games of this tournament here. I think they could go far, but they really do need to lock in. I'm not sure the rest of the NESCAC competition is maybe as good as it's been before to test them, and you really want to see how they're going to do against Tufts and Trinity here. So
Bob, your thoughts?
This is one of those where the top 25 poll and the NPI are a little bit at odds, because in NPI Wesleyan is the top 8. They're sitting there at 8 right now, a protected team. In the top 25 poll, what are they, 16? So a little bit of a gap there, right? And I think, much like Ryan, like they're playing their best basketball now. Early in the season, they lost with 3 games pretty early, right? TCNJ and Farmingdale State, and then a little while later Nichols. So all before January 1st, they lost that game to Amherst before they started rolling. I think that they look really good. I've watched them a couple times in the last 2 weeks or so. They look very good to me, and to me, they're in that mix of teams that's all about even, that jumbled mess. But I'm impressed by them. Like I'm really high on them right now.
I'm middle of the pack. I've got them 18th. I kind of have the same thoughts as Ryan. I don't want to rely on thinking they're great from what we've seen in the past, but at the same time, I don't want to just knock off what they have pulled off. They're obviously, this week will be telling, right? This week will be very telling in the tournament. Moving on up, I'm going to jump on another Wesleyan. Illinois Wesleyan feels like, Bob, this is kind of weird to say, a little off the radar, despite that they're 12th, despite the CCIW. It feels like there's a lot of other things going on nationally that are got their attention. But your Titans, 21-4, good running streak. They've been playing great since, mid-December.
Yeah, I think if you take out the 2 terrible losses that they had, in a weird spot of the season, they lost at home to Stout and they lost at North Central. If you take those out and they were sitting there at 23-2, they might be ranked 2 or 3 or 4 or 1. It's possible. Like if their only losses were to Carthage and Elmhurst, they are right now a different team, because the guy that was named the player of the year in the CCIW, Noah Cleveland, is currently hurt. He's got a wrist injury. They hope to get him back. In a soft cast playing. But the interesting thing is they're very deep. And, they lost Josh Fridman and they plug in Jackson Nego, and he's been fantastic. They lose Noah Cleveland. They put Brady Keel in there, and he's not Noah Cleveland, but they've kind of played different. And now Mason Funk is scoring 30 a game. So they're very, very deep. And it's a matter of like, can they get through the conference tournament without Noah? To me, that's dicey. Like, to me, that's going to be really tough to win those 2 games. If they get Noah Cleveland back, and he's anywhere near what he was, boy, they're very dangerous with him.
It's valid. It's helpful too as a voter from afar. Ryan, any thoughts on the Titans?
Yeah, I mean, this is one. I just think that there's so much size and athleticism there as a team that you just don't see a lot of places. And so you can watch those guys, you watch them warm up out there and you just go, who's ever going to beat this team? Right. But obviously they have had some losses. I feel like I can forgive some of those because that was just shortly after Fridman got hurt. And obviously like that changes the way the team plays quite a bit. It's almost been some of these games farther down. And I know the CCIW is really good. And when you go on the road, these games are going to be close. But at the same time, if we're talking about national title contenders, you want to be winning by a little more than that at Milliken, right? Like that game was a little bit, and even dicey. The North Park game, like there's some moments, they almost lost to Yeshiva. They probably should have, right? Like that's not the they're good and they're showing that in the ranking, but at the same time there's just questions of like what I see in terms of just with the eyes how good the team is, I feel like the results should be a little bit better. And maybe they're rounding into form. This tournament will give them a chance to do that. Obviously, if Cleveland can come back, that's just a matchup that is going to be killer for anybody. So,
Yeah.
I think it's been probably your whole entire time following them, right, Bob, that the team on paper is there and they haven't always been able to pull through at the end.
Yeah, here's what I would say is they always play Ron Rose teams always play their best basketball towards the end of the season because they're so deep. And what happens is in just like November and December and even into January, he's playing like 11 or 12 guys trying to figure out, can this guy play or not play? And by the time it gets to be this time, it's locked in to like 8 or 9 guys. And they really always play their best basketball later. And so I'm hoping that's the case. I'm hoping Noah Cleveland comes back. I mean, I've been watching the Titans 36, 37 years. I think Noah, as a first-year guy, is the best Illinois Wesleyan basketball player I've ever seen. And I've seen like 15 All-Americans. I think he's the best. So that's saying a lot, but he's really, really good. And if he comes back, I mean, boy, they're a tough out in that scenario.
Well, and they're really good at home.
Yeah.
And
right.
being able to have the tournament there, plus probably hosting, the first weekend of games, like that's going to be really helpful too, because they're, basically a lock at home, I think, just with how well they play there.
Being at home would be a big advantage, certainly, especially without Noah. So, yeah, I think, Dave, you throw them in a mix of teams that could do some damage. They could lose early. They could go all the way. You just don't know.
No, that's why I asked you guys. Let's move a little further up. I can't believe we really never talked about this team on this show. Ryan, the Jumbos of Tufts. They lost the opening 2 games of the season, then went on an absolute tear. Neskak has kind of fouled them up a little bit, and Brandon Linton seems like he's absolutely locked in to try and pull off something. What do you think of these guys? They're playing Trinity, by the way, coming up. Talk about a tilt.
Yeah, this is another one. Just all world size, and talented big guys, which you don't get a lot of. That's a huge advantage. The guard play's been really good. They had some lumps at the beginning of the year trying to figure out what the rotation was going to look like. It still feels to me like inconsistency. They're so good, and yet some of these games, especially towards the end, some of the execution has not been where it's supposed to be. Sometimes they just get a little clueless rebounding. It's some of those little things, right, that should help them get far, but maybe prevent them from going all the way. And, you want to see him put it together, and I'm rooting for him all the time. I love a lot of the guys on this team. I think they're really fun to watch. I think it's the kind of team that at their best, is the best of what we have to offer, but we need to see that consistency, right? Like you see Tufts and Trinity, and it was the same way last year. Like Trinity just destroyed them every time they played because the execution was there a lot better. And, Tufts, these guys are a year older. I'm hoping they can lock down and focus in, but man, that they still need to prove that.
Fair. Bob, your thoughts on the Jumbos?
A little bit inconsistent. When I watch them, sometimes they look incredible. Other times, like I saw them watch the home game they lost to Wesleyan. You'd like to think that, if they're as good as we think they are, that they win that home game. Losing at Amherst, certainly not bad. Amherst has turned out to be pretty darn good. You'd like to think they find a way to grind that one out. They only lost by 3 points. The Yeshiva game kind of encapsulates who Tufts is to me. In the first half, it's like, I can't believe I'm voting for this team. And then, they were down like 21 to Yeshiva. Second half, you're like, holy cow, maybe I need to vote for them number 1, And so they're very hard to figure out. And teams like that, to me, are always going to have a game in the NCAA tournament where they're on one of those bad games. And so that's I just don't know who they are from game to game, I have to say.
I was pretty confident until they hit a couple of bumps. I was looking at this team going, geez, they are absolutely on a roll. Then Wesleyan got them at home by 7. Then they lost to Amherst by 3. And I kind of, with a win against Trinity sandwiched in the middle, and I just started scratching my head. I've got them middle of my poll. I had them much higher, but I've got them middle of the poll. Got a time probably for one more, so I'm going to throw one that I don't think we talked a lot about. They're getting 2 first-place votes. You're sitting third, Bob. What are your thoughts on Emory?
I'm huge on Emery. Like if we were talking about, who are the top teams in I think I have Emery maybe two or three. I can't remember, two or three. They're fantastic. It's a guard game typically, and you want to play a guard game, then pick your teams with Ben Pierce and Jair Knight. Like holy crap, um, super ridiculously freaky athletic. They have size. Um, the Ethan Faust kid has turned out to be a really good player, 6'7", 6'8" kid, wing player that's shooting threes out there at that size. The only question I have about Emery is there are games when they don't shoot it very well from three. There are games that you just don't know what you're going to get, and that's the only question, because otherwise they're just sensational. You get Pearson, Jair Knight running up and down the floor in a fast-paced game. Like, good luck with that. I'd love to see them play like Redlands in the tournament. Wouldn't that be freaking awesome? So love Emery. They're one of the best teams in the country. I think they're one of the best five, clearly. And yeah, just let's see if they knock down enough shots to grind out games.
Ryan, your thoughts?
I think on paper, this is the best team in the country. I always call it the video game team, right? Like if you plug them into your video game, they're going to be the number one team coming out. How that translates to real life is there's a lot of other variables there. And the one thing with Emery that I have seen last year and I've seen this year, end of game execution has always been a little sketchy. The decision making down the end of the game, when to pass, when to shoot, how early in the shot clock, which shots are you taking? That one has given me some pause and some questions. And obviously, you got a guy like Jair Knight, you're gonna take the trade-off for what he does the rest of the game for maybe some ill-timed shots at the end that he's perfectly capable of making, right? But that's the one thing when it gets down to the nitty-gritty, right? They missed the Final Four last year from some of that late game execution. And you want to make sure that they're making the right decisions, and that's my big question mark. I still think that they're good enough to definitely make Fort Wayne. Would I pick them to go all the way? I think I'd have a little more confidence in a team like Chicago.
I'm the same way. As like I'm a little more Chicago, because I feel like Chicago just doesn't have any weakness. They have good big guys. They shoot the crap out of it. They have in Shane Reagan, to me, like the ultimate closer, just the guy you trust late in the game. You give him the ball, he's crafty, he gets in the lane, he scores. You got Nick Roper getting offensive rebounds and being a huge mismatch. I think Chicago, of the two, if I had to pick like who's the better team, I would give just the slight edge to Chicago, because I just think they're a little more complete.
Yeah, you trust them at the end of the game a little bit more, I think.
Yeah. I think that's a good call. I've got those two pretty much neck and neck for similar reasons. I find it interesting you say Redlands versus Emery. I don't think Emery wants to see a SCIAC team in the tournament. Just a thought. Right. That said, Redlands, remember a great chat with Eric Bridgeland earlier today talking about that travel last year out to the East Coast. They came back and then went back out. And he said, I think we were gassed by the end of that second game. I'd like to see Redlands not travel, but if we can avoid two SCIAC teams in the second round against each other, ship them. Yeah. Ship them. Guys, appreciate all the time. Don't have any real question to finish up with, so I'll just kind of leave it on the floor. Any thoughts for this final week of the regular season? The next time we're chatting with some or both of you, we'll be talking NCAAs, Ryan.
Yeah, I mean, just looking forward. It's always tough these first couple of days when there aren't a lot of games, and now they've all got shifted, at least on the East Coast here, because of the snow. They're even farther down this week. It's the tension waiting for them to happen. Just exciting to see what's going to go on, right? We already saw the upsets in the Empire 8, and I'm sure there'll be some more interesting ones as we go along, and looking for some great basketball and big moments.
Yeah, Empire 8 got shredded. Bob, your thoughts?
Yeah, there's not many guaranteed games left right now for most teams. There's not many guaranteed games left. And so this is a really fun week, conference tournaments. And
did an ice storm hit Central Dallas? I think we lost him there for a second. We'll see if he pops back here. Oh, my Lord. I think we lost Bob. How about that? That's just strange. Of all the people that were having issues with power, I would not put Bob on the list. And it may not be power, it may just be internet, but looks like we've lost Bob. Maybe his wife said enough D3 talk. Anyway, Ryan, appreciate your time. I'm sure we'll get Bob back another time, but we'll talk to you soon. Bob Quillman was with us. Ryan Scott as well. Appreciate their time. Bob may pop back. It's just funny. He's just frozen on our screen in the same way you saw him. We'll switch to women now, and Scott Peterson is up to the challenge. We're going to rapid fire at him as well, which reminds me, I actually got to get my my Slack conversation up because he had a list of schools there he wants me to fire at him. Yeah, he's cheating. He knows the list that's coming. That's how that works. But we are going to check with him and see what he thinks. So how did I lose? Oh, there he is. Joining us on the Hoopsville hotline is the aforementioned Mr. Scott Peterson. Good to see you, sir, as always. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good evening, Dave.
Good. Awesome. Hey, we thought we'd take a different tactic on this and just go rapid fire. But first, I want your thoughts on the top 25 as well. We mentioned earlier, nobody in, nobody out. It stayed status quo, just with some shuffling around. Your thoughts?
So one thing I found interesting was that NYU lost 2 vote points. Not surprising. Pretty close game against Chicago. So then I looked down at Scranton. Well, they lost 3 vote points. I was like, okay, well, where are the votes going? Going down to Johns Hopkins. They lost 4 vote points. And Oshkosh down at 5th gained 22 and Denison gained 13. That's probably where they went, but it's still interesting to me that both NYU, Scranton, and Johns Hopkins lost some vote points among the collective voter. I kind of wasn't expecting that. I did not tweet my ballot just because I was crunched for time, but I actually did switch Scranton and NYU at the top of my ballot. I put Scranton up at number 1. And yet,
what was the reason?
Just watching the NYU games, I think they're a lot more susceptible, and Scranton hasn't done anything to not be number 1, except how good NYU has been. And watching the games, they're just not turning teams over the way that they used to, and they're lacking some of the offensive firepower that we saw earlier in the season. It's still a really hard decision because Chicago's a great team, probably a top 15 team. But I'm splitting hairs there for the first spot, and Scranton just keeps smoking teams, was it Susquehanna they played in their second to last game and they beat them by 30?
Yeah.
Just not a competitive game from a team that is either going to be in the NCAA tournament or barely miss. So I don't know, just those performances kind of in tandem. I had them close, all over the last 6 weeks or so, and just felt like pulling the trigger for today.
Listen, Susquehanna is having a great season, so this question may be a little weird to ask. And by the way, while we're speaking of Scranton, Grayson is tuned in. You wanted to ask a top 25 question, send it along, Grayson. We will try and get it answered by Scott or myself. But is there a little bit of you're watching NYU against the rest of the UAA, which is pretty darn competitive, and they know them well, versus you're watching Scranton against maybe a bit of a step back, Susquehanna being the exception. That's why this is a weird question, but a little bit of a step back landmark. Like, can that be a weird optical thing there, or am I overthinking that?
I mean, it can definitely be hard if, being a little bit crude comparing apples and oranges. But, NYU's at home. If they'd won by 12, I probably don't make it, it's really about how they looked to me rather than the point margin. I probably don't make a change, but Scranton with a very, very dominant win over a good Susquehanna team, even if they're not as good as Chicago.
Yeah, fair.
It's hard to parse out all the relative things, but that's what we're charged to do in a kind of subjective manner.
Yeah, no, that's why I was asking the question. Appreciate that perspective. Yeah. All right, so we're going to go rapid fire again. Now, no dubious deep dive or debatable team here. We did this earlier in the season in a different style, but we have a bunch of teams we really just haven't talked about. So we're going to fire them at Scott, just see what his thoughts are on them as a team, kind of their statistical data makeup, as it were. And let's start with a team that I think is a little bit off the radar They're 22-3, which is weird saying because they never lose 3 games in a regular season. Scott, by the way, they had a dominating win over Trine this past week. Hope, what's your thoughts on Hope?
Hope is a team whose top end talent probably rivals any team in the nation. And for a variety of reasons that I'm probably not smart enough to know, they just haven't been able to perform at that top level of their talent consistently throughout the year. I think they can get a little bit reliant on the 3-point ball and haven't had the more consistent non-3-point offense to stem the tide against, some strong teams in the games that they lost. But I loved watching them against Trine, where sure they hit 13 threes, but it was such a dominant win. They were basically even if they didn't make a 3. And I think there was some more consistent offense from them. And then they've also gotten in some kind of relatively defensive funks, and the defensive intensity was quite high over their last couple games. I hope it's trending and not just an aberration, but it's an extremely talented team. I think they have the most dangerous 3-point shooter in the entire nation, and just a whole bunch of talent. They've got size, they've got ball handling, they got some youth, they got some experience. If they're playing at the top end of their talent, you really don't want to face them.
Interesting. All right. No biases included in that, right?
None.
Chicago.
Chicago's a team that's been kind of up and down on my ballot all year as they've gotten some big wins and had some surprising losses. This is a team that's also pretty young, similar to Hope. They're a little bit older than Hope. They're one of the tallest teams in Division III, and I think they often win the rebounding advantage in games, and they're a pretty physical team. 17-6, they're kind of your classic second tier. Sounds negative. It's not negative. Second tier UAA team where 6 losses, you might be comparing them with some 2, 3, or 4 losses across the country, but this is a much stronger team than most of them. I've got their strength of schedule at number 6 in the nation. Their efficiency margin is really strong. They have 5 wins against teams in the Massey top 50, and they have not lost to a team outside the Massey top 30. So all 6 of their losses have come against Massey top 30 teams. Again, this is a team that I don't know what they're going to be seeded in the tournament. I can pull that up real quick. Chicago, they'll be about a 5. So I guess they're one of the higher seeds in a quadrant. But still, that would be a rough 4-5 second round game against Chicago, who I think is a really strong team.
Yeah, fair. Illinois Wesleyan.
Illinois Wesleyan is a team that graduated an incredible group of players last year, but their identity really hasn't changed. They got the same coach. They recruit extremely well, and they develop extremely well. So they've been strong again this year with the big returners, Ava Bardich and Sawyer White, also Sarah Bally. But then they have newcomers led by Caitlin Layden, Asia Kuplaracek, and transfer Leah Palmer. And they're your talented Illinois Wesleyan team. They will trap you in the backcourt. They can score in a hurry. They're kind of similar to Hope. They've got really good top-end talent, but there's been some inconsistency this year. And I think they did have an unfortunate injury to Layden in their last game. And I'm not sure what her status will be going forward, but I wouldn't expect to see her out there. But I think that they will be a tough out always. 4 wins against Massey top 50 teams. Strong team.
We talked about the fact they got surprisingly whooped up on by Hope. How about Trine?
Yeah. So I don't like facing Trine, especially in Angola, because the game plan is always terrific. Trine, they didn't graduate quite the kind of class that Illinois Wesleyan did, but they did graduate an All-American in Sydney Wagner, and I would imagine that the expectations were lower this year going into the season down in Angola, but they're 20-4 with a top 20 efficiency margin. They have big wins. They kind of have one iffy loss, but I mean, they've just been good this whole year. They've trended up, even with a season-ending injury to their post player, Aaron Sherwood. And pretty much across the board, their players have been getting better, especially Madison Wagner and freshman Annika Southworth. So this is, there's a whole bunch of teams that I mean, pretty much all these teams I don't want to face in the NCAA tournament, but Trine is in that category of, Baldwin Wallace or a lot of your WIACs or Wartburg, who are going to have a game plan ready, are not going to beat themselves a lot, and you're going to have to be the better team if you're going to beat them. And Trine is always going to fall into that category for me.
Okay, that makes sense. Lacrosse.
So lacrosse, I've got them with the number one strength of schedule, so that kind of contextualizes the 9 losses. They have 11 wins against teams in the Massey top 50 and only 1 loss against a team outside the top 30. So they don't lose to even mediocre team. Like they don't lose to anyone except if you're in the top 30. Um, yeah, what else to say about lacrosse? I think if I'm not sitting down and watching 9 WIAC games a week, some of the teams start to blur a little bit for me. I was wanting to catch some of the games tonight, but didn't have the time to. But lacrosse they've been a strong team. They haven't gotten a lot of newcomer production, but they returned a pretty large group from last year. They're just going to be another tough out in kind of a mid. They're a 6 seed, so I guess they could slide a little. They probably will slide a little bit. Expect them to lose and not to win the WIAC. Lose once more, but good team as well.
Yeah, certainly. All these are pretty darn good teams. The tournament's so deep. One that I know a little bit about, Gettysburg.
So Gettysburg, if you're looking at the top 50 or 40 teams in MPI, they're one of the absolute youngest teams out there.
They have one
NYU
senior.
is one of the youngest. Hope, Emory, Gettysburg, and there was some other team that is slipping my mind, but Wartburg. I think Wartburg is the youngest. Wartburg's average player is a sophomore for their minutes weighted class year. But Gettysburg is, barely older, young team. They're not terribly tall. They have played the 31st best strength of schedule this year. They have not beat a team in the Massey top 50 and have 4 losses outside the top 30. So kind of a little flip of a profile there. They've had some stumbles and don't have a signature win. So they're probably a cut below the teams that we've talked about thus far. But, 19-6 against the 31st best strength of schedule for a very young team are all really solid across the board.
Yeah, they're a fun team to watch, and watching the light turn on for them, which I think, in my opinion, happened at the Vegas Classic, the D3 Hoops Classic in Vegas. I think that's their kind of moment. They're still susceptible. They still have trouble starting games for whatever reason. I don't get it. They're going to have to go to Goldfarb again to win a conference championship. But they're a fun team to watch, and they're scary good. That entire conference, if you think about it quickly, Scott, that entire conference is going to be good on paper next year. You've got all of Gettysburg back. You have nearly all of McDaniel. They'll lose Beckett. Johns Hopkins is Johns Hopkins at this point. I'm hoping Dickinson's going to be a little bit more competitive as well. That's going to be a fun top of the conference, I think. If they could just figure out the stupid scheduling. Trust me, it's a hot topic in that conference right now. And maybe we see a quick fix next year to see if everybody can get on even scheduling. Christopher Newport kind of fell off the radar, honestly.
Yeah, they're a little bit like Newport, like Gettysburg. So Christopher Newport is 19-4 against the 53rd best strength of schedule. They also have not beat a team in the top 50 of Massey, and they've lost to 2 teams outside the top 30, including number 201, which I do not know off the top of my head. Newport has seemed like they've had a lot of injuries last couple of years. San Diego is never really fully healthy. They lost, I think, Worsham this year, and somebody else, if I remember. They've also had a good amount of transfers, both last year and this year, with varying levels of success, at least athletically. But it's still a really talented Newport team. Their efficiency is top 25 in the nation. They're not a very old team. I say that positively, they're only going to be trending up from here. So I do think they're in the weird position where they really can't lose in the C2C tournament, otherwise they're going to miss the NCAA tournament. But just like everyone we've talked about, you don't want to face them in the NCAA tournament. Newport, if they get through the C2C, they'll be about an 8 seed, which, maybe a 7, which kind of feels, man, Newport in a 7-10 matchup. I don't want to sign up for that if I'm the 10.
No, I don't think I would. You never know what you're going to get. Here's one we haven't talked about, and DePaul.
So DePaul, we talked about Wisconsin River Falls as was it deep dive last week or the week before? And then they ended up putting up a couple really nice wins and got on a bunch of ballots. And I don't think DePaul is terribly different. I think they're a little step back from River Falls, but a similar profile where they have 9 losses, but they have the 15th, that's against the 15th best strength of schedule. 3 wins against Massey top 50 teams, so not tons, but they also have only 1 loss outside the top 30. So they have not stumbled. Good efficiency, top 30-ish, and they're a more experienced team. So they may not be trending up as much potentially as a lot of the other teams that we've talked about, but also DePaul really doesn't take a step back. They kind of reload. But they're an experienced team, a little bit on the outside looking in for the NCAA tournament right now. But, a lot of these Midwest teams are quite tough outs if they do sneak into the NCAA tournament as a 10 or 11 seed.
Sorry, my audio weird. Randolph-Macon, sir.
Randolph-Macon. Really similar profile to Gettysburg. They're both 19-6. Macon against the 36th best strength of schedule. Gettysburg against 31st. Macon only 1 win against Massey top 50 teams, and they have lost to Massey 214, including 4 total teams outside the top 30. Their efficiency is a little bit lower, so they're just kind of. I was about to say plotting. That's not nice at all. I think the ODAC is one of my 10 strongest conferences. They are right in that group below Washington and Lee. His Macon right now is fairly solid at large, so they're probably going to be in the tournament as a 10 seed. And I think just the nature of AQs and at-large bids, those last 5 at-large bids are going to be 10, 11, 12 seeds that no 5, 6, 7 seed wants to face. Those are all going to be strong teams, no gimmies at all, tough outs.
Yeah, no, that ODAC tournament I think is going to be really interesting to follow. WNL is so good, but never know when they might stub their toe. Gustavus Adolphus.
This is a team that, I think it's one of the more impressive coaching jobs this year. They brought back 22% of their scoring, which one of the lowest marks in the entire division. And they're 18-7 against the 20th best strength of schedule, 6 wins against Massey top 50 teams. Good, not great efficiency, but they keep winning with a mostly turned over roster, which is just, it's hard to do, like Gettysburg lost Arnoli, Holtzinger, and Shinya Lee, and kind of has taken some time to gather more of an identity and, gel as a team. And Gustavus had to do the same thing and probably did it quicker. A lot of variables in play there, but that's been impressive this year. That was a team that I thought could easily lose double-digit games just because you're starting over. There's only so much that you can recruit, a lot of coaching, a lot of development that has to go on to get a team to 18-7 and pretty solidly inside the NCAA tournament if they need an at-large bid.
No, great point. Let's see, where are we here? Wartburg.
Okay, so Wartburg does need to win the ARC, but they would be about an 11 or a 12 seed, and that's going to be one of the worst matchups for somebody.
Right?
They similar to Gustavus, they brought back only 27% of their scoring. They are easily the youngest team in the top 75 teams. They have a player who is the freshman that has scored the most points this year. They're one of the high teams as far as points from newcomers. So newcomers to the roster, both freshmen and transfers, are producing. and producing a lot. Hortberg has only 2 wins against Massey top 50 teams and has lost 4 times to teams outside the top 30. Probably what you would expect from a really young team, just kind of growing up. But they're playing great basketball right now. The trend is up over the last couple weeks, and you could easily lose against them.
How about Cal Lutheran? This one intrigues me.
Cal Lutheran is, I feel like they've played a lot of big games. Were they in the NCAA tournament last year? I do not know that off the top of my head.
I forgot myself. I'll check it real quick.
But they are 19-4, albeit against only the 134th best strength of schedule. They have not beat a team in the Massey top 50. And so I think
they beat Whittier and then lost to McMurray in Texas.
Okay, so they've won an NCAA tournament game. They've got Holly running the team. I don't know if you're coming at me with McDaniel next, but Cal Lutheran and McDaniel are really similar in that they have not beat a Massey top 50 team and have 4 losses outside the top 30, including
go ahead and segue.
Including a pretty big stumble. They've played similar-ish strength of schedules, 134th for Cal Lutheran, 92nd for McDaniel. McDaniel does have a lot better efficiency, but I think there are places where I'm more apt to discount efficiency, and I think the more really weak teams that you have opportunities to increase your efficiency beyond a number that is most helpful. So I wouldn't say that McDaniel at plus 33 and Cal Lutheran at plus 20 are drastically different. But Cal Lutheran, I believe, does need to go win the SCIAC, and that's going to be a great tournament. The front runners are probably Redlands, Claremont Mudscripts, and Cal Lutheran, but they're definitely not the only teams that can win that tournament.
Absolutely not. To your point about McDaniel, really good boxing out team. And when they're playing well, they are a tough team. Kristen's done a nice job there, but missing that one little, they just got to, if they get that one win, I think it opens the dam for them, right? It gives them the confidence that they can play at that level instead of just compete at that level. We'll see if maybe we get it this week, but good team.
The tough thing for McDaniel so far is Beckett does so much, and when she missed a couple games or was not at 100%, that's where they had a couple losses. And there was a game in there, I don't know if it was against Hopkins, where she didn't play and they were competitive the whole game.
Hopkins.
And I was like, okay, so you don't have Beckett, and you were pretty much right with Hopkins for most of the game.
Well, twist on that, Hopkins has been without Goldstein since they played Gettysburg. They're 6'2" forwards. So, yeah, they both, to your point, I thought the same thing, but now I'm realizing there was a lot more going on there.
Sure.
Nothing against Goldstein. She's 6'2". I don't know if that's listed right, by the way. She can get lost a little bit in the game. Like, you can lose track that she's there. Anyway, to your point, if they're competitive this week, they're a surprising 5 in the tournament, I think. So they've got to go on the road for all 3 games if they get that far. So it's a little challenging for them. But if they break through, they'll be fun to watch. But again, this might fall short, which will stink with Beckett's career, but they'll have a pretty good squad coming back next year.
Yeah.
They've got a point guard, by the way, who's a lot of fun to watch. She's my second favorite player on that team. Anyway, moving on from teams I know way too much about. Hey, W&J, Washington and Jefferson. We haven't talked about her squad very much.
Yeah, I really don't know what to make of the President's Athletic Conference, because I watched a pretty early season game between Washington and Jefferson and Chatham and thought that both teams were extremely athletic and extremely talented. And Chatham has gone on to just lose a bunch of games.
Yeah.
And Washington and Jefferson, 6 losses is not a lot. It is more than the norm for Washington and Jefferson. But I think that they've got a talented team. I've got them as playing the 139th best strength of schedule and they don't have a win against a Massey top 50 team. So they're kind of one of those teams where you're just like, I don't know if you're the 60th best team in the nation or the 35th. Because if you haven't played the strong schedule, I don't know that you're bad, and they're definitely a strong team, but it's it's harder to know exactly where they might slot as a team without kind of that signature win, not sure if they can beat a team in the top 20, or if they're just really proficient at beating anyone outside the top 75.
Yeah, fair. Another team that's kind of flown off the radar, no pun intended here. We don't really talk a lot about Messiah this year.
Yeah, so not too different from Washington Jefferson. Messiah is 21-4 against the 160th best strength of schedule. So they have fewer losses, but had an easier schedule. But they have beat two teams in the Massey top 50, including number 40, whoever that is. But you don't have the top 40 losing a bunch of games. So, Messiah has a top gear that can go get that win. They don't have a particularly impressive efficiency margin. They are one of the older teams. So coming down the stretch, I think they're probably the favorites in the MAC Commonwealth. And when you have that experience, you are likely going to make fewer errors down the stretch. And a lot of these games are going to be close. And it kind of reminds me of Baldwin Wallace last year, who just won, single digit game after single digit game after overtime game. And at a certain point, I just had to sit down and watch them. And lo and behold, they ran another single point game. And I was like, oh, timeout, scheme up a play, bucket, good defensive stand, box out, get the rebound, rinse and repeat. And I was like, okay, this is not just variation smiling on Baldwin Wallace. They're doing the little things and executing at the end of game. And that's the kind of thing that I would expect from Messiah as well down the stretch.
He's always a great coach, has them well coached for sure. St. Mary's of Minnesota, lost the last two. I'm a little concerned about them. They're taking on Hamline in the next round or in the first whatever of the MIAC. It's going to be a dandy, but I don't know what to peg them right now.
They're a tough one. They brought back a whole bunch of players. They're 19-6 against the 65th best strength of schedule. So same record as Washington Jefferson, but against a significantly stronger batch of opponents. And St. Mary's has 4 wins against Massey top 50 opponents, including number 20. So the top gear is there. I think oftentimes they do need a pretty good shooting night to beat a team that's clearly better than them. And so they might be prone to that sort of variation that, most teams are going to be prone to. But they're a strong team that I'm not sure what is necessary for them to get into the NCAA tournament. I can check real quick if getting to the MIAC finals would be enough. I think if they make it to the finals, but don't win, they would be in the NCAA tournament and have a pretty tough chance if they bow out in the semifinals. So that means you're going to have to beat one of Bethel, Concordia, and or Gustavus, to get to the finals.
Well, and that means you got to get past Hamline, who's also having a breakout season in just the next round alone. Nazareth, this is a pretty good team, but little concerning up there right now.
So they are, they fall into the batch of teams that hasn't beat a Massey top 50 team. Gettysburg, Newport, Cal Lutheran, McDaniel, Washington, Jefferson, Nazareth. And we haven't mentioned them yet, but Catholic also hasn't. So Nazareth is 22-4, really good record against the 209th best strength of schedule. So the weakest strength of schedule that we have talked about thus far. Their best win is against Massey number 81. They do have a decent efficiency margin. They're also a pretty experienced team. I don't know if I would expect that they are the front runners in the Empire 8. But they would obviously need to, they're the front runners in the Empire 8. And probably even more so with, I believe Brockport was upset by Elmira. And so Geneseo and Houghton would be the main challengers to Nazareth at this point. And then in the NCAA tournament, they would probably slot in. Oh, I don't know. I have Geneseo winning for some reason in my simulations, but Nazareth would be similar, around a 14 or a 15 seed in the NCAA tournament.
Stevens Point, sir.
Stevens Point is similar to La Crosse and River Falls, but a little bit lighter. So they have more losses. They're 15-10. and their strength of schedule is only the 13th hardest in the nation, not the first hardest, or River Falls is the second hardest. And so Stevens Point, very similar profile to those teams, but just probably needed 2 extra games to be at the level of La Crosse and River Falls. Stevens Point has beat 4 Massey top 50 teams, including number 7. They have only 1 loss outside the top 30. They are not a super experienced team, but also not a super young team. And I've been impressed that they've been able to replicate last year's success after graduating. I think her name was Alexa Thompson, who was a great player. And when you graduate, any really, really strong player, I'm just going to guess that you can't replace them. You can try to use a Moneyball term, you can try to replace them in the aggregate, but it's easier said than done.
Yeah, fair
and
point.
I think, it doesn't mean she wasn't a great player, but they've replaced that production quite well and have been another really strong team. But it's tough sledding in the WIAC, and you kind of need a big step forward to really put yourself clearly among the top half of the league. And, yesterday, I think it was yesterday or the day before, I tweeted out that I think the worst team in the UAA or the WIAC would win at least 56% of conferences, and I'm thinking about teams like Stevens Point and Stout or Rochester and Case Western. Those are really strong teams that probably get overlooked because they've lost double-digit games.
Yeah, logical. 2 more. Rochester.
Oh, okay. Perfect segue. Didn't even plan for it. So Rochester is below 500. They are 11-13, but against the 7th best strength of schedule, and they have beat a Massey top 50 team. And they have a good but not great efficiency margin as well, kind of really similar to Nazareth, Stevens Point, St. Mary's, Messiah, Cal Lutheran, Randolph-Macon, Gustavus Adolphus. They all have efficiency margins within a couple points of each other. And I think I don't know if I've watched Rochester. No, I have watched Rochester play second half against Case Western earlier this year, but that's about it, just because they haven't been in the conversation for the NCAA tournament. And, I think that's too bad, because that's a strong team that is probably one of the best 80 teams in the nation. And I'm not sure how many people realize that, for a below 500 13-loss team.
Certainly didn't realize it myself. Final one, Pat Coleman's Cardinals of Catholic.
Cardinals of Catholic. So Catholic brought back 59%, so below the average, but not a small amount. And I think I would guess that this year has not met their expectations. 17-8.
I would agree.
Against the number 51 strength of schedule, and they have not beat a team in the Massey top 50 and have 5 losses against teams outside the top 30. And, I really don't have a whole lot of information on Catholic. I haven't followed them super closely, haven't watched a lot of their games. Don't know if any of their losses came in overtime or when a key player was out with a short-term injury or something. But they've, as a 17-8 team against a non-elite strength of schedule, they kind of feel like they've performed kind of consistently throughout the whole year, where they're able to get a decent win here and there, but are susceptible to a slip up against a team lesser than they are. And so they're just kind of in that large midfield around 40 to 55, perhaps. But they're definitely a strong team, and I think they would need to go win the landmark to make it into the NCAA tournament, which is a tough proposition with Scranton out there.
No, that Scranton is the beast, right? The entirety of it all. Hey, sir, I appreciate it. That was a nice little hot fire. Anything else you want to add to what will be an exciting week, obviously?
It was fun to go hot fire on all of those teams, because I know that we try to talk about as many different teams, conferences, and regions as possible. So hopefully over the course of the women's top 25 double take, we covered just about every team that was in the top 60 at any point during the year. But for this upcoming week, I'm not sure. Like, I haven't really scoped it out. It's kind of with all the weather causing changes. I don't feel like I'm really locked into the dates the games are happening. I kept rechecking today to see, is there really only 2 T3 women's games today?
I know it's a little weird.
It was kind of a, and I think they were originally scheduled for today. Like it wasn't a change. They're just, and so, and, the WIAC follows a pretty standard 6-team, 2-team bye structure, but they just happen to start earlier than the rest of them. So yeah, I think I'm going to have to do a little more research to be a little more prepared for what key games are happening on each day. But I think the bulk of the finals are Saturday. Does that mean the bulk of the semifinals are Friday, or does it mean that they're Thursday?
No, it's gonna be a mix of Thursday and even Wednesday,
So,
and then Friday. Like the Centennial is Friday, Sunday. I know some who are Friday, Saturday. I know a lot who are Thursday, Saturday, and I know a handful that are Wednesdays. I think the Landmark's Wednesday, Saturday. Now I think about it. So I would say your bulk's going to be Thursday.
yep. I think not looking at conference championships, Carnegie Mellon and Emory coming up is probably an NCAA tournament play-in game from the UAA. I would assume, and then we talked about it on the top 16 reveal, but ODAC, OAC, MIAC, and Landmark and Centennial are kind of the conferences with chances to have a team either move into the NCAA tournament or are in but could fall out if they take a loss a round earlier than they might expect. Those are kind of the big ones that can shift bids who are getting bids around the country. And then I think we also saw from Ryan Scott's mock bracket that he posted on Twitter and also put I think 68-minute explainer video on YouTube that
I know that feeling, sir. I know that feeling.
I might be the most excited person to go and watch that in the entire world. But I think it showed that geography can make things really, really tough. And depending on if the last couple at-larges are, St. Mary's and another team from Wisconsin versus Gettysburg and DePauw, or, some team much further east, could have quite large ripple effects over just how the entire field gets bracketed.
Play my scary sound effect because it will be scary for a lot of people. And I think that's where Kristen Hughes' comment. Listen, we're going to protect the top 16, but that doesn't mean the top 16 are all going to host, because we're going to have to make arrangements that allow the bracket to be the bracket, but have to within guidelines, right? She didn't commit to saying those are our hosts. And I appreciated her saying that, because I think the reality is you're not going to be able to pull that off. I just hope they don't group all the Region 10s into one. I hope they don't take the shortcut out, but we'll see what happens when they get there.
Yeah, I really hope that they don't. And I think, I don't know if it was some gleaning going on, but it sounds like if all of those Region 10 teams don't really have any sort of top seed among them, that it allows the committee to make a much stronger case for an extra flight or two to move them around. And the bulk of them look like they're 9 seed or lower. Like sometimes you can squint. You got a 4 seed, number 4 quadrant seed out of Texas. They can be our number 1 in the pod and save us some flights. But when your highest one's a 9, it makes it tougher. And also, I was looking today at the Minnesota, Wisconsin, Illinois, Iowa kind of geography. And there's a couple 15 and 16 seeds. And then there's almost no other seed lower than a 9. And you need, ideally you have a good 14, 13, 12, 11 that you can slot around. Well, that kind of creates the perfect opportunity to fly a 13, 12, and 11 from Region 10 into that geography. And can kind of alleviate some of that seeding pressure. And it does sound like the Women's Committee wants to respect seeding as much as possible. And that would definitely be a good argument for flying some of those Region 10 teams into kind of that Region 8, 9 geography.
Yep, completely agree. Well said. Sir, thank you for your time. as always, we'll catch up with you. Maybe next week we'll take a dive into the brackets from an analytical perspective.
Sounds great.
If you're up for it. We're monopolizing time. We got to get Scott a t-shirt. Hey, bud, appreciate the time. Take care of yourself. Enjoy the week.
See ya. Scott
Scott Peterson joining us on the Hoopsville Hotline. Good top 25 double take. Grayson never asked his question. I'm sorry you missed it, Grayson, but if you want to email me it. Well, hold on. Just jumped in. No, it's seeding about March. Grayson, we're not going to talk about seeding on this one. Talk to me on Thursday or email me, but I think I've answered your question. You've sent it a few times. Thanks for your time. Everybody, thank you for joining on the show. Good conversations to be had, and great to have Bob Quillman and Ryan Scott take a couple of heaters, you could say. We threw a couple teams at them, and then Scott Peterson diving into a bunch of teams we hadn't had a chance to talk about. If you are watching this on the archive and you have not been a member of Hoopsville's campaign, as it were, please consider doing so. You can do so at buymeacoffee.com/Hoopsville. That's not really going to work the way I just did that. So we'll come back out on the cameras. Right there at the top of the screen, buymeacoffee.com/Hoopsville, or use this QR code and support our work. That way you can watch these shows live and on demand. And moving forward, we'll have a bunch of other things you can sign up for to get to see as well. And then, of course, on my end, too, you get to see my bracket. Or my ballot, I should say. My ballot. Hopefully we'll get that out a little bit sooner than last week. Last week, I got it out at the end of the week. I had written it Monday night. For some reason, on Tuesday, Wednesday, etc., I just never hit publish. So I apologize to all you out there who enjoy that. So there you go. Grayson, again, you had a top 25 question earlier in the show. Never asked it, so we missed it. But then a seeding question, email me. We'll try and give you a question. I answered your seeding question earlier today, I think, or over the weekend. No, earlier today. It was about earlier today. So check your email. And for everybody else, thanks for tuning in. You've been watching Hoopsville, presented by D3Hoops.com for the WBCA studios. This is the top 25 double take. It might be the final double take of the season. It probably will be the final double take of the season. So thank you to Ryan Scott, Pat Coleman, Gordon Mann, Riley Zayas, Scott Peterson, Bob Quillman, Matt Snyder, Ryan Winnable, Mike Rainiak, Ira Thor, Howard Herman. I think I got everybody who appeared on this show and gave their insights on the top 25s from their perspectives. Really appreciate it. It's been fun. If we get one in next week, great. If not, the show will be back next season as well. Yes, Grayson. Again, check your email, sir. I will talk to you all soon. Thursday at noon Eastern. Sunday, probably 6:30-ish. We'll go with a selection Sunday. Monday, 4 p.m. Eastern, March 2nd, 4 p.m. Eastern. We'll be doing our bracket breakdown show, and then the following Thursday at noon Eastern. You've been watching. Thanks so much for taking the time to join us. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you back here on Thursday.